The Dominion had watched Earth for 300 years. They had studied the humans from the darkness of space, watching them build cities and fight wars and reach for the stars with their primitive rockets. Admiral Al stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked at the blue planet spinning slowly below him. His scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the familiar thrill of victory. This would be his 48th conquered world. "The displacement field is ready, Admiral," said his second-in-command, a younger named. Al nodded his massive head. His species stood 8 feet tall with gray scaled skin and eyes that glowed a faint yellow in the dim light of their ships. They had ruled this sector of the galaxy for 1,000 years, and no species had ever successfully resisted them. The humans would be no different. "Begin the operation," Al ordered. Far below on Earth, it was a beautiful Tuesday morning in Chicago. The sun was shining and the streets were filled with people going about their normal lives. Daniel walked down Michigan Avenue with his wife and their 7-year-old daughter. They had just finished breakfast at their favorite cafe and were heading to the park. "Can we get ice cream later, Daddy?" asked, tugging at his hand. Daniel smiled down at her. He was a tall man with brown hair and kind eyes. He had served in the Navy for 10 years before becoming a teacher, and now he spent his days helping young people learn about history. "Maybe after lunch, sweetheart." Laughed and squeezed his other hand. She was a doctor at the local hospital, and this was her first day off in 2 weeks. "You always say maybe, and it always means yes." Daniel was about to respond when something strange happened. The air around them seemed to shimmer like heat rising from hot pavement. He felt a pulling sensation in his chest, like someone had grabbed his heart and tugged, gasped beside him and screamed. Then the world disappeared. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was no longer in Chicago. He stood in an endless gray void that stretched in every direction. The ground beneath his feet was solid but seemed to be made of nothing. There was no sun, no sky, no buildings, just gray emptiness that went on forever. But he was not alone. Millions of people surrounded him. Men, women, and children of every age and background stood in confused clusters, their voices rising in a wave of fear and panic. Daniel could see businessmen in suits standing next to construction workers. Elderly couples held onto each other while young mothers clutched crying bobbies. Everyone on Earth, it seemed, had been brought to this place. Daniel grabbed his arm, her face pale with terror, was crying, her small body shaking. "What happened? Where are we?" Daniel pulled them both close, his military training kicking in as he scanned their surroundings. He saw no walls, no doors, no way out, just people. Millions and millions of people, stretching to the horizon in every direction. "I do not know," he admitted, "but stay close to me, do not let go." A few hundred feet away, he spotted a group of soldiers in uniform trying to organize the civilians around them. Daniel recognized one of them, a sergeant he had served with years ago named Carlos. He led his family toward the group. "Carlos," Daniel called out. The sergeant turned, relief flooding his face when he saw a familiar ally. "Daniel, man, am I glad to see you. This is insane. One second I was at fort, the next I was here with everyone else." "Same thing happened to us. Any idea what is going on?" Carlos shook his head grimly. "Best guess, aliens. We always joked about it, but I think this is first contact, and not the friendly kind." Daniel looked around at the sea of humanity. 8 billion people, give or take, all of them ripped from their lives in an instant. Whoever had done this possessed technology far beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The thought should have terrified him. But as he held his wife and daughter close, Daniel felt something else rising in his chest. Anger. Back on Earth, Admiral Al smiled his needle-tooth smile as the displacement field completed its work. In the span of a single second, every human being on the planet had been pulled from reality and deposited in a pocket dimension where time moved differently. Centuries could pass inside while only days passed in the real world. It was the Dominion's greatest weapon, and it had never failed. "Send in the survey teams," Al ordered. "I want a complete assessment of this planet's resources within 48 hours." Descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing in empty cities around the world. Soldiers in powered armor stepped out onto silent streets, their weapons ready for resistance that would never come. They found cars stopped in the middle of roads, doors left open, food still warm on tables. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. Because they had. Commander reported back from New York City. "Admiral, the displacement was complete. We are detecting zero human life signs on the entire planet. The world is ours." Al clasped his clawed hands behind his back. "Excellent. Begin cataloging their technology. These humans were primitive, but they may have created something useful." He turned away from the showing the empty planet below. In 300 years of watching humanity, they had seen them fight countless wars, develop nuclear weapons, and dream of reaching the stars. But they had never seen anything that suggested the humans could threaten the Dominion. They were just another species to be harvested, their planet just another rock to be stripped and abandoned. Admiral Al had conquered 47 worlds. He had enslaved billions of beings across a dozen species. He had never lost a battle, never shown mercy, never known fear. He was about to learn all three. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that existed on no map and in no database, something ancient and powerful began to wake. Sensors that had been dormant for decades suddenly came alive, detecting the absence of human life on the surface. Automated protocols that had been written before most of humanity was born began executing their coded instructions. Massive doors that had not opened since the Cold War started to move. And in the heart of the facility, a single cryogenic pod began its revival sequence. Inside, a woman who had volunteered to sleep until the end of the world slowly opened her eyes. The end had come. But so had the beginning of something the universe had never seen before. Commander Bradley took her first breath in 3 years and immediately started coughing. The cryogenic fluid in her lungs burned like fire as her body forced it out. She rolled onto her side, gasping and shaking as warmth slowly returned to her frozen limbs. The revival process was never pleasant, but she had known that when she volunteered. "Welcome back, Commander Bradley," said a calm female voice. "You have been in cryogenic suspension for 1,096 days." Pushed herself up on trembling arms. She was in a small white room filled with medical equipment and monitoring screens. The pod she had slept in stood open behind her, still dripping with blue fluid. She was wearing a thin medical gown and nothing else. "Status report, Athena," she croaked, her voice rough from years of disuse. The AI responded immediately. "I regret to inform you that the protocol has been triggered. All human life signs on Earth's surface have disappeared. Approximately 400 alien vessels are currently in orbit around the planet. Ground forces have begun landing operations in major population centers." Closed her eyes and let the words sink in. This was the scenario they had always feared. The scenario that Project Prometheus had been created to prevent. She had hoped she would never wake up, that she would sleep peacefully until old age took her or until the project was no longer needed. But hope had never been a strategy. "How long until the planet is stripped?" she asked. "Based on intercepted communications and observed patterns from conquests of other worlds, we have approximately 72 hours before irreversible environmental damage begins." Stood up slowly, testing her legs. They held. She walked to a locker on the wall and pulled out a fresh uniform. The black fabric felt familiar against her skin, and the insignia on her shoulder reminded her of who she was and what she had sworn to do. "Show me the facility," she said. A door slid open and walked into the heart of Project Prometheus. The main command center was a massive underground cathedral built into the living rock of the mountain. Holographic displays filled the air with information about Earth's current situation. Red markers showed the positions of alien vessels in orbit and landing parties on the surface. The scale of the invasion was staggering. But what filled the rest of the screens was even more impressive. 500,000 green dots covered the globe. Ships, human ships, warships built in secret over 7 decades and hidden beneath every continent on Earth. They had been designed by the greatest engineers humanity had ever produced and constructed in underground factories that had operated in complete secrecy for generations. Each ship was crewed by advanced artificial intelligence based on the combined knowledge of humanity's greatest military minds. And all of them were waking up. "Athena, give me a summary of our assets," said, taking her place at the central command station. The fleet consists of 500,000 vessels of various classes. This includes 50 carrier-class ships, each capable of deploying 300 fighters, 1,000 battlecruisers armed with plasma cannons and nuclear missiles, 10,000 destroyers for escort and screening operations. The remainder consists of frigates, corvettes, and support vessels. All ships are fully operational and awaiting your command. Stared at the screen showing the hidden fleet. Her grandfather had been one of the original scientists who founded Project Prometheus back in 1952. He had intercepted alien communications and discovered the terrible truth about the universe. Hundreds of species existed among the stars, and most of them were predators. Earth was not safe. It had never been safe. It was only a matter of time before something came for them. So humanity had prepared in secret. Every major government had contributed to the project while keeping it hidden from their own people. Resources had been funneled through black budgets and shell corporations. Scientists and engineers had lived their entire lives underground, never seeing the sun, building the weapons that would save their species. Millions of people had dedicated their lives to a project they knew might never be needed. But it was needed now. "Begin activation sequence for all vessels," ordered. "Bring them to launch readiness." Across the planet, the ground began to shake. In the Nevada desert, massive doors hidden beneath sand dunes started to open. In the Amazon rainforest, trees toppled as sections of Earth the size of football fields lifted into the air. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, heat bloomed as fusion reactors came online after decades of dormancy. The ocean floor split open in the Pacific, releasing bubbles of air as ships the size of cities prepared to rise. Admiral Al felt the vibration through the deck of his flagship. "What is that?" he demanded. His sensor officer's face had turned pale gray, a sign of extreme distress in their species. "Admiral, we are detecting massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. Thousands of them, tens of thousands." "What kind of signatures?" The officer's voice trembled. "They appear to be reactor signatures, Admiral, ship reactors. They were shielded somehow. Hidden. We missed them completely." Al strode to the main display and watched as green dots appeared across the planet's surface. They faster than he could count. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 300,000, 500,000. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Our scans showed nothing." "They were buried underground, Admiral, beneath oceans and deserts and mountains. Our sensors could not penetrate the shielding." The first ship broke through the surface in Nevada. It was enormous, easily twice the size of any battlecruiser. Its hull was black as the void of space, and its weapons ports glowed with barely contained energy. More ships followed, rising from the earth like ancient giants waking from a long sleep. On the bridge of the Defiance, Bradley watched her fleet rise around her. Ships emerged from beneath the Sahara Desert, their engines burning a way of sand. They rose from the Amazon, leaving behind craters where ancient forests had once stood. They burst through the ice of the Arctic and Antarctic, sending glaciers tumbling into the sea. They climbed from the depths of every ocean, trailing seawater like tears. 500,000 warships, built for a war that humanity had always known was coming. "All vessels report ready, Commander," Athena announced. "The fleet awaits your orders." Opened a communication channel to the flagship. "This is Commander Bradley of the United Earth Defense Force. You have taken our people. You have 60 seconds to return them and withdraw from our system. This is your only warning." Admiral Al stared at the showing the human woman. She stood alone on the bridge of her ship, calm and composed, delivering an ultimatum to the most powerful military force in the sector. He laughed. "One warning, you dare threaten the Dominion." His expression did not change. 50 seconds. Al turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy that ship, destroy all of them." The fleet opened fire, unleashing enough energy to crack a continent. The Defiance's shields absorbed the barrage without even flickering. "Your 60 seconds are up," said quietly. And then she gave the order that changed the universe forever. "All ships, weapons free. Engage." Battle for Earth began with a flash of light that could be seen from the surface of Mars. The human fleet moved as one, 500,000 ships acting with perfect coordination. Their AI pilots did not feel fear or hesitation. They did not need to breathe or rest or doubt themselves. They simply executed their programming with cold, mechanical precision. And their programming had been written by the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced. Admiral Al watched in horror as his opening barrage splashed harmlessly against the lead human vessel's shields. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen defensive technology so advanced. They had always been the most powerful force in their sector of the galaxy. Their weapons had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. But these humans were different. "All ships concentrate fire on their flagship," Al ordered desperately. "Bring down those shields." 300 warships turned their weapons on the Defiance. Plasma beams and kinetic rounds and missiles filled the space between them. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon. Bradley watched the incoming fire on her tactical display and did not flinch. "Athena status?" she asked calmly. "Shields holding at 94%, Commander. Enemy weapons are ineffective at current power levels. Recommend we begin our counterattack." "Agreed. All battlecruisers fire at will." 1,000 human battlecruisers opened fire simultaneously. Their weapons were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Where plasma beams were hot and fast, human weapons were something far worse. They had spent 70 years studying every piece of alien technology they could find, and they had improved upon all of it. The first ship exploded in a ball of white fire, then another, then 10 more, then 50. The human weapons cut through shields like they were made of paper. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were reduced to debris in seconds. Captain Torres commanded a squadron of frigates from his position on the Defiance's tactical center. Though his body was still in cryogenic storage along with every other human, his mind had been uploaded to the ship's computer decades ago. He was one of 200 volunteers who had chosen to become part of the fleet. Their consciousness merged with artificial intelligence to create something new. "Focus fire on their engines," ordered his squadron. "Do not let any of them escape." The frigates moved with impossible speed, darting between the larger ships like wolves among elephants. They targeted the engine sections with surgical precision, crippling vessels and leaving them drifting helplessly in space. The gunners tried to track them, but the human ships were simply too fast. Admiral Al gripped the arms of his command chair as his flagship shuddered from another impact. The tactical display in front of him was a nightmare. Red icons representing his fleet were blinking out one by one, replaced by the blue markers of expanding debris fields. In less than 5 minutes, he had lost a third of his forces. "Admiral, we must retreat," urged. "We cannot win this fight." Al's yellow eyes blazed with fury. "Retreat? The Dominion does not retreat. We have never lost a battle in 1,000 years." If we do not withdraw now, we will lose more than a battle. We will lose everything. Another explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared throughout the bridge as systems began failing. Al looked at the showing the human fleet. They moved with such unity, such purpose. Every maneuver was perfectly coordinated. Every attack was optimally timed. It was like fighting a single organism with 500,000 bodies. How, he whispered, how did they build this without us knowing? The answer was simple, though he would never fully understand it. Humans were a species born from fear. They had evolved on a world where everything wanted to kill them, from the weather to the animals to each other. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. Fear was woven into their very DNA. And when they had looked up at the stars and discovered they were not alone, that fear had transformed into something else. Not panic, not despair, but cold, determined preparation. They had known the universe was dangerous, so they had prepared for danger on a scale no other species had ever imagined. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the fleet had been reduced from 400 ships to 23. Most of those survivors were heavily damaged, their weapons offline, their engines crippled. They drifted helplessly among the wreckage of their comrades, waiting for the killing blow that never came. Bradley opened a channel to the remaining vessels. "Attention, surviving ships, power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. This is your only chance to survive." On the bridge of his battered flagship, Admiral Al stared at the in shock. His hands were trembling. In 40 years of command, he had never experienced defeat. He had never known what it felt like to be outmatched so completely. Admiral said quietly, "Your orders." Al looked around his ruined bridge. Fires burned in several sections. Bodies lay where they had fallen. The pride of the Dominion had been humbled in less time than it took to eat a meal. "Power down our weapons," he said finally. "We surrender." The human fleet surrounded the survivors, their weapons still hot and ready. Boarding pods launched from the larger vessels, carrying automated soldiers to secure the captured ships. The operation was conducted with the same cold efficiency as the battle itself. Watched the final ship lower its shields and open its airlocks for boarding. She felt no joy at the victory, no satisfaction at the destruction she had caused. There was only the mission. There was only the objective. "Athena, what is the status of our people?" "Scanning computer systems now, Commander. I am detecting references to a displacement field generator. The device appears to be controlled from a facility on but there is a secondary control node aboard the Admiral's flagship. If we can access it, we may be able to reverse the displacement." "Then that is our next objective. Prepare a boarding party for the flagship. I will lead it myself." "Commander, I must advise against personal involvement. The risk is unnecessary." Shook her head. 8 billion people are counting on us, Athena. Our people trusted that someone would come for them. I will not let machines do what humans should do themselves." She walked to the armory and began putting on her combat armor. The war was not over yet. It was only beginning. And she intended to bring everyone home. The boarding pod slammed into the hull of the flagship with enough force to shake the entire ship. Metal screamed as cutting lasers burned through the alien armor, creating an entrance where there had been none. Steam and smoke filled the corridor as Bradley and her team of automated soldiers pushed through. Wore heavy combat armor painted black, with a helmet that fed tactical information directly to her eyes. In her hands, she carried a pulse rifle capable of punching through armor at close range. Behind her marched 20 robotic soldiers, their movements perfectly synchronized. "Athena, give me a path to the bridge," said. "Processing ship schematics now, Commander. Turn left at the next junction and proceed 300 meters to the central elevator shaft. The bridge is located on Deck 1. Led her team through the dark corridors of the alien ship. Emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, casualties of the battle that had just ended. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something alien and sharp. A squad of soldiers appeared at the far end of the corridor, their weapons raised. They opened fire immediately, filling the air with plasma bolts, dove behind cover as her robotic soldiers returned fire with devastating accuracy. The firefight lasted only seconds before the fell. "Resistance eliminated," reported the lead robot, continuing toward primary objective. They reached the elevator shaft to find it destroyed, probably sabotaged by the crew to slow any boarders. Looked up at the vertical tunnel stretching away into darkness. "Activate magnetic climbing systems," she ordered. The robotic soldiers attached themselves to the walls and began climbing. Followed, her armor's built-in magnets gripping the metal surface. They climbed in silence, passing deck after deck of the massive vessel. Occasionally, they heard sounds of fighting from elsewhere in the ship as other boarding parties secured different sections. The bridge doors were sealed when they reached them. Two guards stood ready on the other side, their weapons pointed at the entrance. Could see them through the thermal sensors in her helmet. "Breaching charge," she ordered. One of the robots placed an explosive device on the door and stepped back. The blast blew the doors inward, knocking the guards off their feet. His team rushed through before the smoke had cleared, securing the room in seconds. Admiral Al stood in the center of his ruined bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his officers. He had a weapon in his hand but had not raised it. His yellow eyes watched as she approached, and she saw something in them that she had not expected. "Respect. You must be the commander," Al said in heavily accented English, "the one who delivered the warning." Raised her visor so he could see her face. "I am Commander Bradley. You are Admiral Al of the Dominion. You have invaded our world and taken our people. I am here to get them back." Al lowered his weapon slowly and set it on the floor. "I have studied your species for many years. I thought I understood you. I was wrong." "Where are my people?" "In a pocket dimension created by our displacement technology. Time moves differently there. They have experienced perhaps a few hours while several days have passed in normal space. They are unharmed." Stepped closer, her weapon still raised. "How do I bring them back?" Al gestured to a console on the side of the bridge. "The displacement field is controlled from but there is a secondary node here. It was designed as in case the primary control was destroyed. You can reverse the field from this console, but you will need my authorization code." "Then give it to me." The Admiral's needle teeth showed in something that might have been a smile. "And why would I do that? You have defeated my fleet, but my species still controls dozens of worlds. If I help you, I betray my people." Lowered her weapon slightly. "Let me tell you something about humanity, Admiral. We did not want this war. We spent 70 years building a fleet because we were afraid of exactly what you tried to do to us. We never wanted to use it. We just wanted to be left alone." She took another step forward. "But you took our people. You ripped 8 billion humans from their lives and their homes. Children were torn from their parents. Families were separated in an instant. Do you have any idea what you have done?" Al's expression did not change. "We have done what the strong always do to the weak. It is the way of the universe." "No," said firmly. "It is the way you have chosen, and it ends now. Give me the code and you will live. Refuse, and I will tear this ship apart piece by piece until I find another way to bring my people home. Those are your options." The Admiral studied her for a long moment. He had conquered 47 worlds and enslaved billions of beings. He had never shown mercy and never expected to receive it. But looking at this human female, he saw something that made him reconsider his position. She was not bluffing. "The code is AL779 Prime," he said quietly. "Enter it at the console and select the reversal protocol. Your people will be returned to their exact positions at the moment of displacement. Nodded to one of her robots, who moved to the console and began entering the code. She kept her weapon trained on the Admiral. "Why did you surrender?" she asked. "You could have fought to the death." Al's eyes flickered to the showing the human fleet surrounding his remaining ships. "Because I am not a fool, Commander. Your species has been hiding this power for generations. You built a fleet capable of destroying the Dominion, and you kept it secret. That shows patience and wisdom beyond anything I have seen in my lifetime." He paused. "The Dominion thought we were the greatest power in this sector. We were wrong, and I would rather live to report this discovery than die protecting my pride." The robot at the console turned too. "Code accepted, Commander. Reversal protocol is ready to execute." Took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything Project Prometheus had been built for came down to pressing a single button. "Do it," she said. The robot activated the protocol. Across the pocket dimension where 8 billion humans waited in confusion and fear, the gray void began to shimmer. Daniel felt that strange pulling sensation again, the same one he had felt when everything began. He grabbed and held them tight. "Something is happening," he said. The void dissolved around them. And then they were home. Daniel found himself standing on the same street corner in Chicago where everything had begun. The sun was shining, cars were stopped in the middle of the road, and people were appearing out of thin air all around him. Was still holding his hand, was still pressed against his leg. They were home. For a moment, nobody moved. 8 billion people had just experienced the strangest event in human history, and none of them knew what to think. Then the screaming started. Some people cried with relief. Others shouted in confusion. A few just sat down on the ground and refused to move. Daniel looked up at the sky and saw something that took his breath away. Warships, thousands of them. They hung in the atmosphere like dark clouds, their massive hulls blocking out portions of the sun. He had never seen anything like them. Nobody had. And yet there they were, painted black and covered in weapons, watching over the cities of Earth like guardian angels. "Daddy, what are those?" asked in a small voice. Daniel had no answer for her. The truth came out slowly over the following days. Government leaders around the world made announcements explaining Project Prometheus and the secret fleet that had saved humanity. They told the story of how scientists in 1952 had discovered alien signals and realized that Earth was in danger. They explained how generations of people had worked in secret to build a defense force capable of protecting the planet. And they introduced Commander Bradley, the woman who had led the counterattack. Stood before the United Nations 3 weeks after the Battle of Earth, as people were already calling it. She wore her military uniform, black with silver insignia, and looked out at the assembled representatives of every nation. Behind her, a massive screen showed images of the hidden fleet and the facilities where it had been constructed. "For 70 years, your governments kept a secret from you," she began. "They knew the universe was dangerous, and they knew that someday something would come for us. So they built a fleet. They trained soldiers. They prepared for a war they hoped would never come." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The war came, and we won. But winning one battle does not mean we are safe. The Dominion is just one of many powers in this galaxy. There are others who are stronger, others who will see what we did here and wonder if we are a threat." Looked directly at the cameras, broadcasting her speech to billions of people around the world. "We have a choice to make. We can use our fleet to conquer the way they did. We can become the monsters we fought against. Or we can choose a different path. We can use our strength to protect, not just ourselves, but others who cannot protect themselves." In Chicago, Daniel watched the speech on a television in his living room. Sat beside him and was asleep upstairs, finally exhausted after days of barely sleeping. The world had changed around them, and he was still trying to understand what it all meant. "Do you think she is right?" asked quietly, "that we should try to protect others?" Daniel thought about his time in the Navy, about the oaths he had sworn and the battles he had fought. He thought about the moment when he had been ripped from reality and thrown into that gray void. He had felt so helpless, so terrified, and then someone had come to save him. "Yes," he said, "I think she is." The vote at the United Nations was unanimous. Humanity would not become conquerors. They would become guardians. The fleet would be expanded and improved, not for war but for protection. They would seek out other species, make alliances, and offer their strength to those who needed it. 6 months later, the first human diplomatic vessel left Earth orbit. It was called the Hope, and it carried a crew of 200 men and women who had volunteered to be humanity's ambassadors to the galaxy. Commander Bradley stood on the bridge, watching Earth shrink behind them as they accelerated toward the stars. "Transmission ready, Commander," said the communications officer. Nodded, "Send it." The message went out on every frequency the Hope could broadcast, spreading across the void at the speed of light. It was simple, written in 100 different languages that humanity had learned from intercepted alien communications. "We are humanity. We come from the planet Earth in the Sol system. We seek peace with all species who desire peace. We offer friendship to all who would be our friends. But know this, we are prepared for war. We have the power to defend ourselves and others. Any who threaten us or the innocent will face the full strength of our resolve. Choose wisely." The message spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Species who had never heard of Earth suddenly became aware of the blue planet and its 8 billion inhabitants. Some were curious, some were afraid, and some, like the, began to reconsider their ways. Admiral Al stood trial before the Dominion High Council for his defeat at Earth. Many expected him to be executed for his failure. Instead, he told them the truth about what he had witnessed. He described the human fleet rising from beneath the surface. He spoke of their weapons and their shields and their cold, efficient way of fighting, and he warned them that the universe had changed. "The humans are not like us," he said. "They do not seek conquest. They do not hunger for power. They only want to be left alone. But if we threaten them again, they will not simply defend themselves. They will come for us, all of us, and we will not survive." The Dominion listened, and for the first time in 1,000 years, they chose not to go to war. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. People went back to their jobs and their families and their ordinary lives, but they did so under the shadow of the fleet that watched over them from orbit. They knew now that they were not alone in the universe. They knew that dangers lurked among the stars. But they also knew that someone was protecting them. Someone was standing guard while they slept. Someone had built a shield around their world and sworn to keep them safe. Daniel returned to teaching history a month after the invasion. On his first day back, a student raised her hand and asked him what he thought the most important lesson of the attack was. He thought for a long moment before answering. "Fear can make us weak," he said finally. "It can make us hide and surrender and give up. But fear can also make us strong. It can make us prepare and train and build things we never thought possible. The universe tried to break us because it thought we were weak. It was wrong." He smiled at his students. "Never underestimate what humanity can do when we are afraid, because we have been afraid for a very long time, and we have been preparing for even longer." Outside the classroom window, a patrol of black warships passed silently overhead, keeping watch over a world that would never be taken by surprise again. The universe had tried to harvest humanity. Instead, it had awakened a guardian. And the guardian would never sleep again.